the panels. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Pritam Singh. Thank you very much, Pritam Singh. Yeah.
Thank you, Rajinder, for the kind introduction. And also thanks to Randeep Sain, who actually put me in touch and also invited me for this. What I'm going to do is to touch up 4 or 5 issues. And how much time do I have? 20 minutes? 15 minutes, I see, okay. Just touch up those issues, and if there is a time in the panel discussion, I'll be happy to try and answer the questions you might raise. The first point which I want to emphasize, on which I would have liked to spend more time, but I will touch up mere points, that why is the Sikh community not produced world-level intellectuals? It's a very sobering thought. We need to recognize, first of all. Then we can attempt an answer to why it has happened so. That Sikhs have done very well in business. Some of them are very, very rich in this country, in India, in America, Canada, and so on and so forth. They've done very well in the army, top army generals. They've done very well in sports. They win a lot of awards. Singers and even film actors and so on and so forth. But why not world-level intellectuals? Especially public intellectuals. When I say this, I want to make a brief distinction between an academic and a public intellectual. An academic is one who specializes in his or her area of expertise. A public intellectual is one who is able to then disseminate that information at a wider public level. And this is a startling observation on the Sikh community, that it hasn't produced even one single level world intellectuals. And if you compare with other communities, I would think about comparing with the Jewish community. We are the fifth largest world religion in terms of population, about 30 million, and Jews are half of us. And you go to any university, go to any department, and go to any big newspaper, go to any big news, television, you will find Jewish intellectuals everywhere. Now, one might say that that's not a fair comparison because they come from a different tradition, we come from a different tradition. But one thing I want to emphasize, which poses me as a paradox, that this is the only faith where we worship the Shabd. Guru Granth Sahib is a Shabd. Other communities have their respective holy books, Quran and Bible, etc. But they don't present them as a guru. We present the Shabd as a guru. And it's a community which does not engage in so much with the Shabd. Okay? Even more, that 1984 huge Holocaust, genocide, whatever we might like to call it, and there's not one single book written. I'm a part of that failure. I've attempted, but I haven't produced a book as yet. That not a single book which can capture the imagination of the world community in terms of reflections on the Sikh faith, Sikh's place in Punjab, India, and the global world. Okay? That's another way of recognizing it. Now, you might ask me that, what do you think are the causes for that? Okay? It's a big question. I'm going to work on this. I haven't fully explored this. I have been struggling with this. And publicly, this is the first time actually I'm sharing these thoughts. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. It's a very challenging task. I will mention 2 things as a possible explanation of the roots of this failure. One sociological and other historical. Historical is very brief, which many intellectuals probably might say. the Sikh community was born in a period which right after the fifth Guru was martyred, and then the entire spectrum of the Sikh community changed. It came into battles and disturbed all the time. There was no time to reflect. But just think about Guru Gobind Singh, whose father was martyred, and he was in combat, but he had 40 poets. Okay, he wrote the Dasam Granth. And so being involved in a struggle does not necessarily mean that you can't reflect and theorize and put your ideas into form which you can engage with other communities. He wrote Jafarnama. It's a fantastic document. And while all his children had been killed by that time. But I would say that everyone can't be Guru Gobind Singh, but we can be his followers. Sociological is that it is the nature of the evolution of the Sikh community. When we look at the evolution of the Sikh community, we find that Guru Nanak challenged 4 big powers of that time. Political, the Mughals, and the social, the Hindu caste system. It's a whole ancient religion, very, very powerful. He questioned both. He confronted Babur, he confronted Brahmanism. Okay? And he found some followers. In the beginning, he was just alone. Okay? His sister thought that her brother wasn't some ordinary person. She was probably his first follower. But in the beginning, he was alone. And the first group of people who became his followers were Khatri, members of the Khatri caste community, which sought allegiance with him. They were considered number 2 in the old Hindu hierarchy, so they found a new religion where they are on the top. But I won't say that is the reason they joined, because there's some affinity. But eventually, the Sikh faith spread among communities are the caste groups, which were considered lower in the Hindu order, mainly agrarian communities, involved in agriculture, whether cultivators or artisans and so on and so forth. And one of the global observations on the rural communities is there's a lack of reflection. The communities which are agrarian in character do not sufficiently reflect on themselves. It's a thought. It can be challenged, it can be probed, but this is one sociological. And the old Hindu tradition, where the scholars came mainly from the Brahmin community and some from the Khatri community, they did not convert to Sikhism. Very few Brahmins converted to, you can count them on fingers. Among the Khatri community, there's one estimate, I don't know how far it's true, that only 10% of the Khatris became Sikhs. 90% still remain among the Hindus, though those 90% have some kind of a relationship with the Sikh community. It's a complicated one, but it is a downtrodden community which came to Sikhism, which is also true of Islam in India. That these two religions which preached equality, and that's my thesis on Sikhism, that egalitarianism is the key to understanding Sikhi. And fighting for equality, considering all human beings equal. There are various dimensions of that egalitarianism, which I've covered in some of my lectures, which are available on the internet. But similarly in Islam. So that's one partly sociological explanation of the lack of intellectuals in the Sikh community. You tell me when 5 minutes are left, so that I don't exceed my time. I don't want to. Then I want to come very briefly, again very, very briefly, about what do we mean by Sikhs in academia. Okay? And I think in 2 terms. One, in terms of representation. There is Sikh in economics department, Sikh in law department, Sikh in a biological department, and so on and so forth. It's not unimportant. It is important. Physical presence is important. I mean, the women's studies, feminist studies have actually done a lot of research on this, that how representation is important. And representation, whether in the parliament or academia or in the media, representation is important, But more than that, it is whether the subject in which you are participating you are able to bring certain ideas of Sikhi and Guru Nanak's thought. Because merely being representation is not good enough. You can see Banga has become chairman of the World Bank, and many Sikhs are very happy. I don't mind if they are happy. But what can Banga do in World Bank? Okay? He's doing the same neoliberal agenda which anyone else who is a non-Sikh can do it. Okay? It's true that he has a turban and his beard, so the world comes to see an important Sikh. Or Manmohan Singh, he was a friend of mine, he's much older than him, but still I had friendly relations with him. And he's a prime minister. The world came to see, because it's a relatively small community globally. We are much below. I mean, the first four religions are very, very big, and then we are fifth. But the difference between the fourth and us is huge, massive. And so there is important. But then what did he do? I mean, in terms of there is some contribution in economics, not massive. The only intellectuals I can think of who brought his Sikh teachings, Sikh values into the academic world and still was recognized in discipline was Ajit Singh of Cambridge. He was a very, very dear friend of mine. He actually was examiner of my DPhil thesis bench also, and that actually brought us closer to each other. And but that's all. I cannot think of another Sikh intellectual. So when we say Sikh in academia, this is what I mean. When I was teaching in Oxford Brookes Business School, my dean told me, after a couple of years I was there, he said, Dr. Singh, you are such a wonderful scholar, or whatever he praiseworthy. You should write only on the global issues. Why do you bother about Punjab and the Sikhs and so on and so forth? I said, well, I will engage with those issues, but I will never leave Punjab and Sikhi. And he was partly disappointed, but partly maybe impressed with my commitment and integrity, that I didn't want to just please him. And after some years, when India rose in importance, and obviously from a business point, he said, that's wonderful, you still take interest in India and Punjab and so on and so forth. And so that's another challenge, that when we are in a sociology department, history department, law department, how do we bring our teachings into that frame? It's a challenging task. It's not an easy task. I'm trying to bring it through ecology, because I see Guru Nanak was one of the original thinkers, ecological thinkers. And again, I'm writing a book on Guru Nanak and ecology, which is half written and has been in the making for quite some time. So how do you bring that? Now, it's possible that not everyone can do that. That social science disciplines are more capable of bringing your Sikh values, your Sikhi values, or Guru Nanak's teaching, Guru Granth Sahib's teaching. If you are an economist, talk about inequality. If you are a sociologist, talk about hierarchy. If you are a historian, if you are a political scientist, you can talk about these things. But if you are in law, or if you're in medicine, or if you are in physical sciences, whether there's any possibility, it's possible that maybe some subjects are not vulnerable or not open to those ideas being trained, and you might find that difficulty. And one might also ask that why should we think about only those disciplines, the ones which I mentioned, both sociological disciplines? One reason, purely pragmatic, but also more than pragmatic, is that this world is a world of narratives. Okay? The world is faced by narratives. And narratives are not determined by biological scientists. Narratives are not determined by someone who studies physics or theoretical physics. Narratives are determined by people who are engaged in social science disciplines. Okay? You see among the Jewish community, they dominate the narratives. They dominate in the newspaper, they dominate in the television, they dominate everywhere, And our narratives are not known to the world. When I was a visiting scholar at Wolfson, and I taught for 2 years at Oxford University in the last part of my career, I did my DPhil, so I have been engaged with the university for a long time. I had always felt that no one knows about Guru Nanak and no one knows about Sikhi here. And whenever I will mention it, they will say, yes, Guru Nanak was a Sikh leader and beyond that, nothing. In a world-leading university where there is, of course, study of Christianity, Judaism, massive Islamic Center of Studies, most impressive. Center for Hindu Studies, there's a chair in Buddhism, there's also study of nothing about Sikhism. So I started initiating this debate. And it was very, very difficult to even any department or college accept this proposal because it looked esoteric to them. But eventually, with a long struggle, and that's what is required, we need to have the capacity to be resilient, persistent, hardworking, and also admit where there are failures. A proposal to set up a postdoctoral research fellowship was accepted in Wolfson College, and we appointed a very brilliant young woman who did her PhD at LSE, and now she's a postdoctoral fellow. Now, that's the kind of thing which I think is I mean, she will engage with other scholars. She's from a background of anthropology, and if we are able to establish on a permanent basis, which is the next big task, then hopefully in 30 years we will produce 10 intellectuals, and who will spread all over the world. Some will go to America, some to Canada, maybe India, even Pakistan, and some here. And in 100 years, maybe 30 intellectuals. So the paucity of Sikh intellectuals, which I'm saying, this is a small step, and many more steps need to be needed. But we need to grapple with this issue. The fourth, very brief point, which I want to emphasize, that anyone who comes from the tradition of Guru Nanak and Guru Gobind Singh and the Guru Granth Sahib has to recognize the global challenges in which we are situated. Guru Nanak confronted the situation in which he was faced with. Guru Gobind Singh, dealt with the challenges which he faced with. And we are followers, we need to face those challenges. And what are those? Very briefly, I would say, one is the ecological disaster. That we are really faced with a terrible ecological disaster. Carbon dioxide emissions and biodiversity loss. These are slightly off-putting topics. People think they are boring, but they are very important. In the next 10, 15 years, we will come to recognize how big this is. Second is inequalities. The human world, including UK and India or USA, wherever you come from, the level of inequalities we are facing now, history has never experienced. Some people have so much wealth, you can't even express. They probably even don't know they have so much wealth. And there's a grinding poverty, impoverishment on the other hand. How do we, as intellectuals coming from tradition which is based in egalitarianism, confront with this, engage with this? And if we are true to our values, we can't just forget. We have to engage. And this could be from an angle of physics, from biology, from chemistry. This is a vast field where you don't have to be social scientist, because understanding the environment is a complex phenomenon. The ecological changes which are taking place, they are economic in nature, they are physical in nature, and they are biological in nature. It's a very complex change which is taking place. Similarly, inequalities. And of course, there are some wonderful doctors who have written books on inequalities and showing that how inequalities affect health provision and health. So it's not that there's a watertight compartmentalization between some sociologists studying inequalities and a doctor studying inequality. It's possible to do that. And the final point which I want to make, given the limited time, is to have the courage to also make internal critique within the Sikh community. We don't sufficiently, my friend Gurnam Singh, as a sociologist, he does wonderful work in this task, very brave one. He points out flaws in the Sikh community. And I will just list out one or two. One is casteism. A faith which was supposed to get rid of caste. Guru Gobind Singh and Kaur, nothing else. Okay? And we still are rooted in casteism. I come from a family whose surname is Gill, so they gave me Gill. But by the time I came into school final, I understood that this Gill business is just a, showing off your caste, and because Jats are a powerful community, I don't want to have anything. So I thought Guru Gobind Singh said, sing, I will sing. My family doesn't still recognize, wherever they have to put my name, they put my name as Gill. But this is just one, okay? So that's a huge challenge. That how does a faith which is based on, whose foundations are based on egalitarianism, still indulges in one of the most reprehensible forms of activity? If I have to criticize Hinduism has many beautiful features also, certain mythology and so on and so forth. But one thing which I want to criticize, my wife works more on that. She's a philosopher, Professor Meena Dhanda, and she's working on this. And it is casteism. That a faith which is supposed to challenge that is also reflecting the same kind of casteism. So we have to critique this casteism in different directions, in family relationships, in our conversations, in our work, and so on and so forth. The second, I would think, is obsession with money. I think it's probably true of all communities, that in some even probably more powerful than the Sikh community. But again, a thought which is supposed to have a critique of Maya. Okay? Papa baaj na hove kathi moya saath na jaye. Guru Nanak said the last word. Papa baaj na hove kathi. That wealth cannot be accumulated without committing sins. You have to exploit someone to accumulate capital and wealth. Okay? That community is so fascinated with money. And I encounter this in my day-to-day life with people. I find it amazing that it's a huge big house, but they not even have 10 books in the house. Okay. So this lack of intellectualism which is reflected in day-to-day life, but they'll spend a huge amount of wealth on a child's wedding or a birthday party and complete vulgarism and obsessed with making more money and showing off that money. How do as Sikh intellectuals, Sikhs who are in the academic world, confront this internally? The third, very briefly, is domestic violence. Okay? There's a massive amount of domestic violence, mainly directed against women, but maybe against children as well. We keep silent on that. Professor Jagbir Jutti Jol at Birmingham University, she's done some wonderful work on this. And I and my wife are editing a huge volume, a handbook of Rotary Studies. We are carrying a paper by her on this. But this is a subject on which we don't speak enough. Okay? And again, a faith which stood for gender equality from the very beginning. Guru Nanak was way ahead of other thinkers. People talk about gender equality, the feminists have talked about gender equality in the 20th century. He talked then, so we have to also be internally critical. So I would conclude by saying this, that Sikhs in academia need to confront this, that why we are not producing world level intellectuals and how do we overcome. And if we become aware of this, we will make our efforts. Okay? I'm sure that I met some young person here today. He told me about the work he's doing at Oxford in the internet department. I was so fascinated. I said there is a hope, that they are not all becoming doctors and accountants and financial advisors. And I meet some families who say my son is in the investment bank. I tell them that yes, he is making good money, but what has he got to do as a Sikh? Whether it's investment banker is a Sikh or a Hindu or a Christian, it doesn't matter, because that investment banking is going to suck his or her blood irrespective of their faith. We are not doing anything there. Of course, if they are able to earn a lot of money and contribute something to projects like this. Maybe there's an indirect contribution of that. But you have to engage with this subject, that why we are not producing world level intellectuals. If first of all is to recognize this, okay, and to recognize the failure of the community collectively, and its individual failure, and it's like I mentioned about this. No book has been written on the 1984, and I have also not written a book. I mean, I've written a more political economy book. It's an individual failure also, but that individual failure is a part of the collective failure because you're part of the community. Then you will think about that you have a big historical task on your shoulders, and you will realize the enormity of the task and also the challenge. It's challenges which throw new thoughts, and challenges which throw new ideas and inspire you to do something wonderful. Thank you.
Pause now. I think it'd be really good to take some questions now.
Oh, okay.
If that's okay with you.
Oh, yeah, I'm okay.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Pritam. Again, wonderful, provocative presentation. I think I would say you are one of our great Sikh intellectuals, so we have some, and even Rajinder Lalis, so we do need to recognize the ones that we have. And that's part of the problem. We tend to excommunicate the ones that we have. And we go back to history, Gandhi Singh, and that's part, there's an internal problem that somehow if a Sikh intellectual thinks outside the box, thinks different, thinks radically, then they are enemies of Sikh. So there's a kind of illogical problem there, and we need to kind of find a way out of that. But the other question is this one. We always talk about Sikhism, or we always talk about Sikhism as a religion. And when we frame it as a religion, then we put it into the religious studies department, and it becomes ghettoized. I mean, I'm doing a lot of work on Sikh ethics, Sikh philosophy. Why shouldn't the philosophy degree have Kant and Nanak side by side? Why shouldn't economics be teaching Marx and Nanak or the Gurus? There's a student from Warwick, she's doing stuff on Sikhian design.
Absolutely.
Kartapur. So why don't we take Sikhi into the disciplines rather than stick it into the religious studies department?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a wonderful point which you made, that the Sikhi is been mainly confined into religious studies, and that's also my critique of the chairs on Sikh Punjab studies which have been established in America. Most of them just engage with each other, and they fight with each other. So petty quarrels, and jealousies and competition, because they are so narrow into that framework. Okay, that's partly the reason. There could be other reasons, personality reasons also. And the intellectuals you talk about today, Gandhi Singh, Sahib Singh, Pritam Singh Naba, they were great intellectuals.
Puran Singh.
Puran Singh. But they were also intellectuals within the Sikh community. Their engagements were within the Sikh community. Their work did not lead to engaging with others outside the work community. And when I'm talking about the changing the global narratives, I'm talking about that your voice should be heard by others. Noam Chomsky is just one. Okay, he's a Jew. Whole world listens to him when he writes and speaks. Okay, Edward Said was a Palestinian, so he's a Christian by background, non-Muslim. One single Edward Palestinian changed the course of Oriental studies. Okay, that's the power of intellect, especially more in the modern world. Okay, and it's not that only Palestinians will listen to him, and the whole world listens to him, and in anthropology, sociology, history, literature, and so on and so forth. And we haven't been able to produce those kind of things. Thank you for saying about me and agenda, but I think that we haven't reached that level. We might, another 10, 15 years, we might reach some level where the world will listen to us. The only time I felt for a brief moment of time was during the farmer struggle. In the farmer struggle, I wrote a lot, I gave lectures, and I was whole time involved in this. My other work got neglected, and I wasn't worried about that. That time, I was approached from France, from Spain, from Italy, One day there was a phone call from Slovenia, a small country. I thought, this is what is happening. Because this is the issues which the farmers' movement was raising, agro-business capitalism, the farmers' struggle against that, and of course the visibility of the Sikhs, that they were leading this struggle. Okay? And of course the whole of India, especially who was opposed to these farm laws, marveled at these people. Their resilience, their creativity, their brilliance, and so forth. That is the moment I felt that there is a world recognition. That whatever work we are doing, they're thinking about this. And then my articles were translated into French, into Italian, into Spanish. They were circulated in Brazil and so on and so forth. But apart from that, I don't see that kind of. So we have a lot to do, and we should not be satisfied with these small achievements.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Zach. Yeah, yourself, yeah.
Yeah, brilliant presentation. We were talking earlier, I just wanted to add, what would your advice then be? Because I agree with Pritam saying that I think it's the case that debate and discussion and deliberation is not considered much today in Sikh farm.
Yeah.
And if we're looking at the hearts, we have in the book the book written by Pritam Singh, The Rose of Empire, which goes through how Brookes is not just a political leader in the sense of physical temporal power, but also spiritually and quite spiritually also into fostering debate, discussion, and deliberation. So I guess my question to you would be, what would you recommend to the Sikh students here?
Yeah.
Would be the next steps?
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think they should do in their positions
Yeah.
to kind of take this vision and what we had in the heart and bring it back?
Then I mentioned someone from Oxford who I drew in mind, and that was a brilliant question, and I'm so pleased you answered. One thing I would say, that each one of you must take out some time in your life to read Guru Granth Sahib. It's not a difficult text to understand. Okay, it involves persistence, and you can do it. Okay, I also did not do it when I was an undergraduate or postgraduate. Only when I had done my PhD, and I did it. But it was a wonderful, liberating experience. I used to read only 1 or 2 pages every day, and every day when I wasn't able to do it every day. When I was traveling, I wasn't able to do it. But whenever I did it, I almost did it first thing in the morning. Okay? It was a blessed day. I felt the whole day very different. I rose above small little things, considerations, troubles, and I was in a different realm of thought. And it will put you into different. Especially when you read, Guru Nanak. He is such a wonderful thinker and a philosopher. The world hasn't recognized. That's my kind of complaint against the world, if one can say, that such a mighty thinker, and we are making some efforts. Hopefully, they will fructify in some way. So read Guru Granth Sahib. When you read Guru Granth Sahib, you will get so many insights into ecology, into sociology, into history, into medicine, into money making and not money making, and so on and so forth. So that's one, because and secondly to engage with other scholars, and what you're doing this is a part of the exercise. But both the things are important. If you haven't read Guru Granth Sahib, you don't have the grounding on the basis of which you can actually do that.
Thank you for that question. You took my question out of my mouth there. Thank you. Well,
this is an easy question. How long did it take you to do the reading?
Oh, it took me quite some time. I think more than a year. And when I was doing it, I wasn't doing it just the reading. I took massive notes. There are 5 big notebooks, which each line I was making separate notes and also creating an index. The intention was to eventually write a book, which probably, if I remain all right, I will write. But it took a mountain lifetime. There is one internet group which sends you 4 pages every day. And I suggested to my elder brother, who retired as a banker, I said, you have enough time, you should do that. He followed it religiously. He said that I just didn't read it like you. I would actually sit down with a special place, and no one will be there. And that leads only 1 year, because it's about 142 pages or something. So 4 pages every day, and if you miss something, next day there are 8 pages, so you can read 8 pages. So that's another group. I think if one searches it, it's a WhatsApp group, and it's a wonderful. They provide you the original Gurbani. They provide its version in ordinary Punjabi and also its English translation. And one of the translations of Guru Gobind Singh of Guru Granth Sahib, which I found very good, was Manmohan Singh. It's a wonderful translation. Each page is divided into 3 parts. The first part is original Gurbani. The second, parallel to this, is an ordinary modern day Punjabi, and parallel to this is English translation. And the man took 11 years to do this. You know, and if you look at his dedication, it is inspiring. When he was finishing it, his eyesight started falling, and they took him to the doctor. The doctor said that you have to stop this work, otherwise you'll go blind. He says, no, I can't stop this work. Whether I go blind or not, I have to carry on. And then he had a heart attack, and the family took him to the doctor. The doctor said, you are very serious. He says, no, this work cannot stop. You know, he completed it, and 2 weeks after that, he died. And of course, that's one good thing Shromani Gurdwara Prabandhak Committee has done it. They publish his work and very cheaply available. I think the big Gurdwaras here will also have that available. That's one. It has errors, it has mistakes, but then it's only we who can understand this. And maybe someone can also produce an appendage to suggest that how this can be collected. But this is a work of massive, you know, he was a lawyer. And after the partition, he came from West Punjab. He settled down in a small village in Ludhiana and thought that, you know, he wants to devote his life to something more than just doing law, you know, earning money. And he sat down and he bought, like, you know, dictionaries of different places and did it, you know. And so that's one thing I would suggest that you should do. You know, it's a liberation. You will find you've entered a new era in your life after you read Guru Granth Sahib.
Thank you.
Just a quick one to emphasize almost the remnants of the Brahminical idea. After my PhD, learned Gurmukhi and Devanagari, and I've been, only when my mother died, she passed over the family civil, that I read the full Guru Granth Sahib twice. In answer, some practical things. You can read the Guru Granth Sahib, you can also, and if I'll send it to you, you can also get the whole thing read to you in 45-minute sections. Somebody did that on CD many years ago. So you can read it while you're listening, so your Gurmukhi skills will get better, and the emphasis, you pick up the emphasis, and if you know something about it, it's surprising how, shall I say, easy it can be, because it's consistent, and it's beautiful, and you think you didn't know the meaning, but you actually do. And then, of course, again, I'd look at the work on Guru Nanak by Professor Shekel, who describes Guru Nanak as a word genius, how he creates a new language with. And then you say, just like Shakespeare creates so many words, Guru Nanak did that before. And as we talk, I try to work from the ground up. So we should start reading, not be scared of it. But the Brahminical thing is that when I was younger, I asked my mother, I want to learn. मैं तुम पढ़ना चंगी तरह बोलना सीख किस तरह पंच ग्रंथी पढ़ कि तुम मुझे ठीक तरह नहीं पढ़ सकता तुम्हें पढ़ना ही नहीं आता तो मैं कहा देखो एक तरीका ही है one way of not making mistakes is never to do it and there's no mistake so I was very pleased with that comment and I'd say and I'm hoping in my work is Oxford Brookes president that we'll start sitting down and maybe have 5 lines of somewhere in Guru Granth Sahib, get one of the students to read it, spend 15, 20 minutes.
I mean, it's a bit difficult to do it because every day you organize this, but I think that will be ideal. You know,
but anybody starting, it's a wonderful, wonderful experience. It's a treasure that you will.
If you can have a group doing this, it's even more wonderful.
Can I just add one point to that? Because my son, about 2 years ago, he said, Dad, we want to read Guru Granth Sahib. So we started reading together. Every Friday morning. And we started with Japji Sahib, and kind of 6 months down, we're to page 10.
Yeah.
So, you can read it fast, you can read it slow.
Yeah.
But the other really, which is really important, I think that's why I think, we need to be all philosophers. The Guru Nanak borrows the language of the time, yeah? Every Guru, we borrow the language. So he borrows Vedantic words, he borrows Quranic words, he borrows words from all these different traditions, but don't think he's using them in the same way in which he's used in the original. If you do that, then you read him as a Vedantic scholar or as a Quranic scholar. No, Guru Nanak, he takes these words and he changed them in. I mean, this is kind of, people who are into linguistics, you probably can say more about. I think Arvinder Pal Singh Mandera has been doing work on this. Where he subverts the meaning. He takes it somewhere else. I think that's important. Not just to read it, but to read into the words themselves.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that really, really inspirational talk.